Okay, so you've probably seen the Serena Williams story that has become the biggest story in sport globally over the last 24, 48 hours or so. She's been fined for her outburst, which cost her a game in the second set in the final of the US Open. She has been fined €15,000. This is an interesting story, right? So Serena post in the press conference asked what she would do differently in hindsight, said, I can't sit here and say I wouldn't say he's a thief because I thought he took a game from me, but I've seen other men call other umpires several things. I think that, like, everybody's got a hot take in this where she's 100% right or she's 100% wrong. And there's a possibility that there's enough bullshit on all sides here for everybody to have been a little bit wrong. And also for us to kind of think, well, what is it that drives somebody to be so suspicious of the rules at that point? Like, why does Serena feel like she's being targeted in a way that she thinks is unfair?
Yeah, well, like, that's very true. There hasn't been a lot of nuance brought to this, when in actual fact, this is probably the one argument where there's a lot of nuance here. Because you say there, what would drive somebody to behave in certain ways? Well, it is railing against, you know, a misogynistic society to a certain extent, and certainly from Serena's background, a racist society, which kind of allows you to rail against society in a way that no other person has seen, no other person has the capabilities of doing, because you've been wronged so many times in your life. So all that part of it is true, but also the whole idea of accusing the umpire on an individual basis of misogyny or racism or targeting of Serena Williams is probably a little unjustified as well, is it not? Like, I think that this has been quite a divisive issue, and it seems that it's been divisive on the issue of wider societal things, but maybe this is just kind of saying to us as a society how divisive Serena Williams is as a person. I think that is one of the key points that actually hasn't been spoken about that much, is that Serena Williams is a person that has divided opinion hugely, and like, you can go down through a number of examples, but a couple of the main examples are, say, the panic room incident, or say the story that was broken by Deadspin earlier on this summer about, you know, getting on the phone to Travis Tygart and not giving a sample when a drug tester comes to her door. So that sort of stuff has created a divisive opinion around her. I'm not necessarily sure if that's down to the societal issues that she talks about. Now, all the stuff she talks about may well exist, and like tennis, you look at it as quite an elitist sport, but ultimately, was she deducted a point for those reasons, or was she deducted a point because she, like, essentially badgered the umpire to the point where he got so pissed off with her that he just had to deduct her a game after the third incident, after the third warning, the third violation, and that's why he did it? I think that's more to the point. But as you say, like, there is a little bit from both columns here as to what's actually correct.
Yeah, I think that these are the type of stories that, like, really you end up reading good pieces about in 5 months' time when the heat has come out of the arguments. Because you can certainly, like, Sue Barker came out and backed her. I've been watching tennis a long time. I've never, ever once in my life seen Sue Barker come out with an opinion about anything, one way or another. But she comes out and goes, I've seen loads of misogyny in tennis.
Yeah, it depends what she's backing her against. Like, I didn't actually see the Sue Barker. She tweeted about it, was it?
I read it in the paper this morning,
So, well, like, was she backing Serena against the officiating, or was she backing Serena against a wider problem in tennis? Because you kind of tend to agree with Sue Barker on the latter, maybe, but when it comes to the actual incident of Saturday night, well, it's kind of hard to defend, isn't it? Regardless of all the other examples you can use as to why there's a double standard.
So I don't know if it's hard to defend or not. Like, I don't know if she doesn't see your man doing whatever the signal is that he says is coaching, but that is just the same coaching that everybody else is doing, then she feels like she is being cheated against. And so therefore the reaction seems like it's out of kilter with the charge. But ultimately, like, I don't know. I'd say that if you come from a viewpoint where you've been racially abused throughout your career, like, you go back to Indian Wells, she didn't go to Indian Wells for a decade because she was abused as a young player there simply because she was good, like, by the crowd. If you have come from that to be the biggest and most important tennis player ever, then maybe you've got a slightly different outlook on things.
Of course you do.
Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a line. But at the same time, like if you feel like something similar, if this is all part of the same narrative to you, then, well, you actually do what you think is right in those circumstances. And like, you can think they're wrong. You can think we can think and have our value system from our position of privilege and go, well, you know, the genteel society says you can't accuse that person of doing that thing. But if ultimately you think that is part of the same process of conduct and treatment, then how do you differentiate that? And what's an appropriate? So say she feels like there is a racist and misogynistic element to what's happening.
Yeah.
But then there's nothing that's inappropriate in your response to that. You're absolutely entitled to do whatever it is you feel you have to do to raise that issue. So that's where this all comes to. You can disagree with that, fair enough, but you're doing that from a position of privilege.
Completely, yeah. I think there's truth in that. Like, just on the slew of Twitter threads that have been put out there around the double standards, when they kind of like show videos of Novak Djokovic or Roger Federer or whoever it may be, men and women tennis players, like giving out stink to umpires in a much more vitriolic way, using far worse language than calling somebody a thief. Like, just to get pedantic for a moment, this was a third violation offence. That's why she was deducted a game. It wasn't to do with the actual verbals she was using towards Carlos Ramos. It was to do with the third violation. It was to do with the coaching. It was to do with the racket. It was to do with the verbal use of words that Carlos Ramos found inappropriate. To be honest with you, he should have just basically sat there and said, right, okay, I'm just going to sit through this and everything's going to be a hell of a lot better for all of us if I don't do anything about this. He completely flared up the situation. He might have been right to do so, but ultimately that's what he did. If you're a tennis umpire within those confines, if you're looking at it from those perspectives, if you talk about putting on glasses of a certain lens, well, if you're a tennis person and you're sitting there as an umpire, is Serena Williams not viewed as a hugely important figure that you're not going to screw over?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they just told her what clothes she can wear, you know?
Well, that's also a fair point.
Because she's a woman. Like, so that's bullshit. Do you know what I mean?
No, it is, completely.
And also, like, apparently all the coaches are doing this all the time. So there is that other side of it. It's like, well, you're literally just applying these rules to me. Anyway, like, I'm not defending the behaviour, but I totally understand it. There's a difference there.